Now, in the second part of this lecture, we'll focus on the relation between economics and sociology. Okay, so we'll first look at the theoretical argument of three famous philosophers in ancient China and try to convince you that the purpose of economic management is about mankind. That's the first thing. And second, we'll learn about Confucius' sociology teaching. And this is also very important because only after we have a firm grasp of Confucius' sociological principles can we truly understand the economic theory of traditional Chinese culture. So, the study of the relation between sociology and economics start with the question of what is the origin of society. So in other words, before we consider the function of wealth in supporting the society, we need to ask, why do people come together? And why do they come to live together in the first place? Now, to understand this, we refer to the theory of three philosophers, namely Xunzi, Ban Gu, and Liu Zongyuan. Now, Xunzi, as some of you may know, is a Chinese Confucian philosopher during the Warring State period, which is, as you may remember, is the period after the Spring and Autumn period. So, in the book of Xunzi, chapter of Royal Regulation, Xunzi gave a logical deduction of the birth of society, and he focused very much on the material side of human survival. So, what does he say? This is also in the excerpt, by the way, okay, in the reading material. So, Xunzi started his deduction with a comparison between human being and a beast. So he said, at an individual level, beast is much stronger, right? And they're more fit to survive than human beings. For example, human beings are not as strong as bulls. Human cannot run away from danger as fast as horses, for example. Well, to be honest, in fact, any large animal can knock us over and kill us quite easily and quickly. But the thing is, bulls and horses are subject to men. Why is that? It's because men are not on their own. They are social. Well, how is man able to be social? Well, it's because of the principle of individual difference. Well, that's quite correct. I mean, in a society, people are connected by various relations. For example, in a company, there are, executive directors, and they have subordinating department heads who, look after regional managers within the department and other employees. That's in a company. But in a society, there are, policemen who maintain security, engineers who look after infrastructures, farmers who provide nourishment, right? Everyone contribute with their specialized skills, and ranks are designed to assist their work. This is not against the notion of equality, by the way, but simply a division of labor. So such individual difference is maintained by the justice and rules. So with justice and rules in place, and the recognition of individual difference, the society can then function in harmony. So moving on, with harmony being generated, people will come together and form great strength. So this way, human beings can not only tame large animals, but also conquer the nature as well. So Xunzi uses the example of secured houses to illustrate this particular point. Now, according to Xunzi, human beings form society in order to survive. Therefore, a proper legal system that protects rights and justice is fundamental to the survival of mankind. And the legal rights are based on ethical justice. But on the other hand, right, what happens if the society cannot distribute the individual right justly? Well, for a start, according to Xunzi, men will quarrel. They will argue. They will fight. Let's think about a company with no clear division of responsibility and authority. It simply won't work, right? A society without individual rights and rules, it will become chaotic. So even within a family, justice and respect are needed to maintain harmony. So without these, the unity of society will fall apart, and people will stop working together. And when they stop working together, they become weak, and survival becomes very difficult. So, according to Xunzi, what is the driving force of the formation of society then? Well, people form a society in order to survive. And from a material perspective, survival depends on the satisfaction of economic need. But the function of the society depends on the realization of justice. That is the functioning. Okay, the functioning of society depends on the realization of justice. So that is the idea of Xunzi in the deduction of the origin of the society. Now, very similar to the survival reason, Bangu also gave his reason. Now, Bangu was the historian in the early Han Dynasty. And he illustrates that the formation of society is also for economic reason. And he discussed this in his book, in his history book, the Book of Han. Now, in his writing, Bangu explains that human beings, they have to enslave natural things in order to provide for his nourishment. Because humans do not have the same physical strength as animal, they have to rely on intellectual power. So Bangu points out that men are different from animal in that men practice the 5 moral constants, which are benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust. Therefore, the factor that unites people together and form the society is love. Look, if men do not love each other, they simply cannot be social. Again, if they cannot be social, they cannot conquer natural things, as Bangu put it, and then nourishment will not be sufficient. What happens if nourishment is not sufficient? Well, as you can imagine, people will start competing for it, and in doing so, warring spirit arises. And that's the beginning of war. And, let's think about these days. Economic war is a legitimate thing to do. Although this war is one without bloodshed, many people did die from that. If you think about this, many people committed suicide during the 1997 Asian financial crisis and 2007 financial crisis. So we have to be very careful with the idea of economic war, because there are consequences. So, back to the argument. What happened after the war breaks out? People will have to search for a leader with excellent virtues of respect, deference, and universal love. When this person is found, people will then follow him and form a peaceful society. Otherwise, they can't survive. So, same question, what is the driving force of the formation of society? Well, according to Bangu, human beings form society in order to increase the supply of nourishment. And love is the fundamental driving force that unites the people and realize efficiency of material support, or subsistence, if you like. Economic need and survival are essentially the same thing, I would say. So both Bangu and Xunzi illustrate the importance of economic life in driving the establishment of society. Now, the last reference that we will examine is the political discussion paper by the well-known politician and writer of the Tang Dynasty, Liu Zongyuan, during the late 8th century. Now, in his paper, Essay on Feudalism, Liu Zongyuan points out that the creation of society is also driven by economic need. And different forms of society are based on what is needed at the time. So they have different needs at different times. Now, as you know from the previous lecture, in a feudal empire, the society is basically structured around relationships derived from the holding of land in exchange for service or labor. So usually there is one emperor who owns all the lands of the country, and then he will grant territories to leading princes in exchange for their services. The leading princes can also do the same thing in a pecking order, right? But in order to understand the origin of society, let's just start from the bottom of the society and work our way up. So, firstly, let's say there is a struggle, okay? There's a struggle for nourishment and material supply at the individual level. So very similar to Xunzi's argument. Man must borrow material from the outside, from the nature, in order to satisfy need because of incompetent physical strength, right? So given a limited material supply, the action of men taking resource from the nature will lead to competition and war quite naturally, because there's not enough to go around. Now, similar to the point of Bangu we said earlier, if war is ceaseless, then people must go to somebody with wisdom and virtue who can decide the dispute and tell people what is right and what is wrong. Then punishment will be used to make the ruling solid and credible. So in this way, there arises the ruler, right? The so-called ruler, and the legal and political system. Eventually, a local society, because we start from an individual person, right? So eventually, a local society is formed by people from the neighborhood, if you like. And we can call this, let's say, a town, right? A little town. And the leader is the town master. But then, the war for resources doesn't end here. It doesn't stop. Now, peace may have been achieved at a town level, but competition still exists between different towns. And because there are more people to fight now, the war is only becoming greater and greater and more devastating. So, in order to end the war between different towns, yet another leader with greater virtue is needed to decide the dispute, allocate resource justly, and maintain peace. So we have the class of feudal lords. Now we can see that we're falling into a terrible cycle here. What is it? with greater power and territory, the war is greater. Feudal lords will fight for resources, and here comes the leading princess who govern multiple states. The war continues to take place, and it won't stop until there is one man with the greatest virtue of all, and everybody comes to him and obey his governance in order to keep all the people peaceful. This person, we call him the emperor. So only when the whole world is united, war stops. The virtue of the emperor causes the unity of the feudal states. That's the idea. Now, during the early Western Zhou dynasty, all the feudal lords, they really looked up to the Zhou kings. Right? As you remember from lecture 1, when we talked about the early history of history of early China. So all the feudal lords looked up to the Zhou king and follow his virtue. Zhou kings govern the China Empire not with his military power, because he didn't have much, but with his virtue. Now, as the virtue diminished, the history entered the warring state where nobody cared about the emperor anymore. So feudalism is not the idea of the sages or a man-made social structure. It is only the necessity of the condition at the time. But we've talked much about the formation of society. What's the point? Well, the point is, economic struggle still is the underlying driving force of the formation of the different societies, as we have seen in our explanation about the cycle. So, we have seen 3 theories of the formation of society. Right? Society based on legal rights, based on love and ethical power, and also historical reason. But whatever the reason is, we can see that the society is always an organization that carries on the struggle for the existence in a collective form. Therefore, the implication of these 3 theories in solving the conflict of the world today is world economy. In other words, the world needs to move towards economic unity in order to solve the problem of the world of sociology. So, according to Liu Zongyuan, we can see that war continues among the different sizes of society, from town to a city and a state, and it ceases only in the unification of the whole world. Well, we must emphasize again that the economic conflict facing the people in Confucius' time was an international issue, not a domestic one. So the teaching by Confucian scholars are driven not by nationalism, but by world peace. So we must keep this in mind at all time in order to make our study relevant to solving today's world problem. Now, in the next video, we'll be discussing the sociology teaching of Confucius.